All right, is it on? Okay. All right. Hello, my name is Herman Landman, and they've asked me to come on here today to this uh, YouTube and tell the story about the time I was abducted by aliens. It's a crazy tale, and I've told it plenty of times now. That's not the kind of thing that you forget about real easy, you might say. So let's go back. This was about 1987, and I was 26 years old. And it was, I had gone for a walk in the woods, kind of like these woods. In the evening, it was about close to 10 o'clock. I couldn't sleep because I had had a coffee with right after dinner, after we had a little bit of, it was spaghetti, and then I had a little piece of cake. I like cake, and I had some coffee with it, and I could not sleep. And so I decided there was a little woods patch just outside from our place. I was prone to go and walking sometimes in the evenings just to unwind and let go and relax and forget about the stuff of the day. So this was that kind of night, and I just went out by myself. I was just in blue jeans and a t-shirt because this was in April, and here in the South, April is pretty moderate weather. It was a nice night. It was not quite a full moon, but it was probably a 3/4 moon. It was pretty full. You could see pretty good out. And I took off to hiking. Now remember, this is before cellular phones and whatnot. Nobody carried cameras or nothing like that, so you just remembered stuff. And like I said, this ain't something that you gonna much often forget about when something like this happens. I pretty much remember it to this day the way I remember it the night it happened, and as soon as I told the story. So I went off into the woods. Now, when I say woods, it's not thick, woody woods. It's more a mixture of some wooded areas and like pasture, just kind of out open land. It wasn't all fenced off and gated like a lot of stuff is now. You got to remember this was 40 years ago. So I got off walking and was just kind of thinking to myself about all the different things of the day. And when I first saw this light off, it was through the trees, and I didn't remember there being a house back there. It goes far back till there's really nothing there, but it works its way back to I say a lake, but it's really like just a big pond, Ivan's Pond, that we used to play in. But I saw a light back that way, And I thought, well, there's not a house back there, so somebody's must be out camping or walking. I didn't even take a flashlight with me on this night. On the darker nights, I'd carry a flashlight, but it was bright enough out, and I had walked out this way before, so I wasn't too concerned about getting lost. Again, it wasn't thick woods. It was had open areas, and there was a good bit of moonlight. And I had been here before, so I saw this light in between the trees back a ways. I couldn't tell at first if it was a little light like a flashlight or a bigger light like a floodlight. But well, now I just wanted to get a little closer and see who was back in there. It wouldn't be completely unusual for someone else to be walking, I guess, and woods was, as far as I know, was just open to everybody. They weren't no trespassing woods or none of that. It was just we all had been back there my whole life, just in the woods, in the trails in the woods, walking around. So I started kind of making my way towards the light just to see if maybe this was somebody back there. Shouldn't be hunting at night, but you never know. Or fishing. It didn't seem close enough to Ivan's Lake. So I started heading that way, and the light didn't really move around. So after a minute, I started realizing, well, that's probably not a flashlight. It was pretty stationary as I was going towards it. And it was getting brighter and, somewhat bigger as I walked that direction. And I, I can't say how far away I was because it was just a light. But there was a point when it just suddenly got real bright, like a car headlight that somebody turned the brights on. Or back then people would have these Q-beam spotlights or whatnot, and they were real bright. Well, that's what this light did. It got real bright, almost where I couldn't see anything. Not really painful, but just real bright where I couldn't see. Lit everything up. It was right in my face. And I kind of stopped trying to figure out, well, what is somebody doing? Obviously, they see me. I still couldn't see anybody. And I was standing still. Now, I was just outside of kind of a clear area. When I say clear, it wasn't just like a field, but it was mostly clear, just some trees. But the light kind of had looked like it was further back in the woods at first. I thought somebody was traipsing around in the woods, but it started getting brighter. And I know now, or I believe now, that it was not necessarily getting brighter, it was getting closer. It was getting bigger, and it was getting, to me, it was then getting brighter as it, I think, got closer. So I didn't move. Not that I was scared. I just, like anything, I assumed it was just somebody fooling around out in the woods with a spotlight. And I just stopped thinking, well, they're going to say something. And again, it was getting brighter and brighter. And then it got to the point where I kind of had to avert my eyes. It was so bright. I kind of looked. I think I had covered my hand up a little bit like this, kind of trying to block it a little bit, thinking, what kind of person is out here spotlighting me in the face? I still couldn't see anything. And at one point, all I said, I know this seems not the smartest thing, but as it got brighter, I think I finally had just said, "Hey," real loud, because I just couldn't figure out what was going on. I wanted somebody to realize I wasn't too happy with whatever this was. Well, as it had gotten closer, there was a point when suddenly the whole, I was a bit blinded. The whole light just shut off quick. The whole light was gone. And I still couldn't see after having been blinded. Like I said, it was like a car headlight just hitting you right in the face, in the eyes. And you know how sometimes when there's been bright light or you come inside from the outside, or well, when that light went off, I couldn't see. Everything was more blacker than the regular night was. It just, I couldn't see. My eyes weren't adjusted. And it took a minute. I was still just standing there expecting to see somebody maybe start laughing and saying they was pranking me, and somebody from up the road a piece or something. But the light went out and I couldn't see. And then my eyes started adjusting to the dark again, the sudden darkness. And this is when I started getting scared, because it wasn't at all what I thought I was just about to be seeing. It wasn't a person standing there. When the light went out and I started to focus, it looked just like some of those goofy pictures you've seen of a UFO. It was just this big silver. I told many people it kind of looked like a plate on the bottom, sort of like a serving plate, and a plate on the top sitting there. But just shiny silver. Now it was dark, but I could still tell it looked like silver metal. And there was no, I know some people have seen aliens and ships with a bunch of lights. This was nothing. I don't even know where the light had come from at the time that I had seen. So as far as it was big, it wasn't as big as you would think like a plane or a spaceship would need to be, but it was kind of like maybe 4 or 5 living rooms big altogether. It's hard to put dimensions on it. I'd say maybe, I think I've told people before that if I was measuring it and walking it, it was something in the neighborhood of maybe 60 feet across in each direction, because it was round. Like I said, it was like 2 plates had been glued together. And I was scared. I admit it, I was froze. I didn't know what to think. Now, this was beyond what I had expected. Nothing I'd ever seen. A couple of goofy stories I'd heard, but not out where we lived. There'd never been anything like this that I know of. And I was froze. I was just completely frozen there. and I didn't know what to think. I still didn't think that it was some kind of alien ship. I did. I remember at the time it was more that I just thought, was asking myself, what in the world? But it sure didn't seem to be nothing that like a people could have made or something. I guess you could, but not at this time. Uh, so I thought about for a second, I thought about just turning and running, but honestly, again, I was so scared. I was just like they say, I was frozen in my tracks like a deer. I I wanted to run, but I just couldn't even move. I just was like a rock, just solid, frozen. And this is the part that's a little bit crazy, which the whole thing is a little bit crazy. I don't remember what happened directly after that. I remember up to that point. And then the very next thing I remember, I, I don't know if I blacked out or that something was done or I don't know. But I know I remember to that point and being scared. And then the next thing I remember is opening my eyes and I'm looking at just a flat metal ceiling. I knew I was on my back, but I didn't know anything else about what was going on. This is the part when I got real scared. I I started to think I must just be dreaming because after I saw the ceiling in front of me, uh, I kind of started to turn and I realized I couldn't move anything. I didn't feel like I was tied or anything, but I could not move. I just thought about moving, but nothing moved. But with my eyes, you know how you can be looking straight, but you can see a little to the side. I couldn't move my eyes back and forth, but even looking at that ceiling, I could see there were some people standing next to that table. And again, when I say people, it was just like some of these crazy movies and stories because they they looked like the alien, goofy alien things you've seen. Their heads were real big and their whole bodies were smooth. Their eyes were just like a shark. They were just black and they were bigger. Like they almost reminded me of like a not as fat, chunky as a baby, but you know how a baby's head is big and his body's a bit smaller. I've seen lots of drawings and other things, people, and crazy thing is that they looked about like those other drawings. They weren't any way different. People said, was it lizard people? I was like, no, they weren't really lizards. They were just smooth and just, uh, they didn't have a whole lot of features. They had a smaller mouth and there was no lips, and their nose wasn't like a pronounced nose. It was more like a recessed in kind of nose, uh, but just smooth. And in the lighting at the time, it wasn't overly bright. It was actually rather dim. They appeared white. I know people call them the gray aliens. They might have been gray. I don't know for sure. Again, I wasn't getting a look up and down at them kind of a thing. And I was scared. I've never been much scared in my life of things, but this was something that had me some kind of scared. My throat cracks a little now when I talk about it because I have never. I was in a fire one time. I've been in some car wrecks. I never this kind of scared. This was a different kind of scared, because even though a part of me thought this is just a dream, uh, it didn't seem like a dream. It seemed like real, and I just couldn't make no sense of it. I didn't know what was going to happen. Uh, I didn't know if I was going to be killed or whatever. It just, you need to kind of take a second and think, if you woke up in some kind of crazy ship with a bunch of these not human looking people, that would be pretty scary. And that's the way I felt. Uh, and people say, well, they experimented. They didn't really do nothing to me. That I now remember, I couldn't really move, and I really couldn't feel anything either. But they weren't really prodding me or poking me, or there was no pain or anything. They just seemed to be just looking at me. Uh, there was initially there was three on the right side, and there was none on my left. But sometimes, again, I couldn't follow them with my eyes, but it seemed out of the corner of my eye one would leave to go do something, which I couldn't see. And then sometimes I'd see one on my left. I can't tell you who's who. They all looked the same, exactly the same. Not a distinguishing thing about them. They didn't have hair. They didn't really have a look. It's the weirdest thing. If they were from another planet, I don't know how they tell one from another, because they looked like copies of each other, just the same little thing. Uh, Again, they look pretty much like about half of those uh, pictures you've seen of drawings of aliens or in movies, or the ones they call the grays or whatever, except they were a little more, to me, more white. I guess that time must have gone on for, it seemed like it was long enough for me to be thinking. So maybe 10 minutes altogether. Again, I would think about just seeing if I could turn or move, but I couldn't move anything. I'd think about it, but nothing moved, including my eyes. They were just straight ahead, and I could just see things to the sides happening. Again, there was no tools, or I don't know for the life of me what they would have been doing, looking and saying, look at this guy or whatever. They didn't do anything. They didn't hurt me in any way. I didn't get any messages or any stuff like that. It was, all in all, other than being terrifying, it was kind of boring. Uh, but I guess maybe about 10 minutes, because I was thinking, going between thinking this has to be a dream, or I must have got hurt and I'm hallucinating or something, and then being terrified that no, this is real. This is aliens, and they've picked me up or whatever. So, uh, and then again, pretty much as before, I don't remember closing my eyes or anything at all. I just remember being frozen there while they were looking. And then the next thing, I am laying on the ground looking up. I see the stars and the sky again. And same thing, I open my eyes, but now this time I could move. So I look around and I can't see the ship, but off in the distance over to my right, as I'm kind of pulling myself up, I can see that light again. Uh, and I wasn't hurt or anything like that, but I can tell you, after I got up, I was tempted to just run for my life, but I was still too scared to run. I thought I might attract their attention and they might come for me again or something. Uh, so I remember after I got up, I was walking. At first, I was walking backwards real slow, and I just was scared it was going to happen again or something worse. And I was walking backwards. I wouldn't take my eyes off that light. Uh, and it was just like the reverse of when I had seen it. It was seeming to get further away as I was backing up, and I would look behind me some. Again, I know that area pretty well. Uh, and then there's a little section there, which is it's kind of a clearing, but they had been doing some, I don't know if they were getting ready to build. There was some digging in that area. So it was almost like a dirt pit. It was much more cleared, not even weeds and certainly no trees. And when I hit that area, that's when I finally turned and I ran full speed. Uh, Again, as an adult, I'll tell you, I ain't been scared of much. I'm not some super brave person, but I was more scared that time than anything ever. So I ran. You go a little ways, and then you're kind of back in a slightly wooded area, not thick woods. And there's a kind of little hill that comes up, and then there's the road. I crossed over the road, and then I was back over to our place. And my first thought was to come in just screaming. At the time, my daddy had already passed on, but my mama was living there with us, and she was there. This was before we had any kids, and my mama was there, and my wife was there, and I thought about just coming in the house screaming, but I thought that would just be worse. That would wake them up and scare everybody. And I came in. I just remember I came in and I sat on the couch for about an hour or 2 hours, just thinking about all this that had happened. It was sometimes people try to say, "Well, you sure you didn't just fall asleep and have a dream?" There's these things where you can have I think it's called a lucid dream, and they said it seems real. And I said, no, I know this was real. It was real. Now, when I say that, let's just say I know for sure the walking out and going was real. I suppose you could, because I've been trying to figure this out for 40 years. Uh, Perhaps, I guess it is a possibility that maybe I could have tripped or something could have hit me or something. I don't recall it. I didn't have a bruise on me. Believe me, I looked. The next day, when I finally told my wife, I told her, "You're going to think I'm crazy," but I wanted her to check me over and just see if she saw any marks or anything. Nothing. Not one thing. But I'm 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 accepting of the fact that I suppose it's possible I could have fell or something and knocked myself out or something and hallucinate. I guess that is a possibility, but I don't much entertain that as the possibility. I can tell you this was as real as anything I've ever done or been through in my whole life. I've had plenty of dreams. I've had plenty of experiences. This was as real as everything that's ever happened. If I fell. It didn't leave a mark anywhere. It seems like it would take a pretty good fall to knock you unconscious or cause you to hallucinate. I don't do any kind of drugs. Hell, back then I had never even taken a drink. I didn't take a drink till I was probably in my 30s, and even then, not much. I eat a lot, but and then again, I'm no genius, but I also try to be objective enough to say, well, could it have been some kind of aneurysm, or well, yeah, it could have been something that it never happened again and it didn't have any effects. How do you explain something like that happening? You either say it happened and I was abducted by aliens uh, for a short time, or you say something happened to me that made me think I was abducted. Uh, what that something could be, I don't know, and I don't believe it. After that, I became a firm believer in aliens. I don't go to conventions. I don't really like to talk about it. I knew people were going to think I was crazy. Um, so I didn't tell a whole lot of people. I mostly told friends, and but sometimes someone will hear that I had this story, and they ask in a nice way um, if I wouldn't mind telling them that they're truly interested in it, not so much research, but just interested. And I don't mind telling it. I'm not ashamed of it, and I know I'm not crazy. Again, I'm no genius. I'm older now, and I still can't sort it out except to say uh, I think it was aliens. I think there's a lot of people and a lot of stories and military and all this kind of stuff, and I think it's highly possible that they come here and visit, and I don't know what they do. I know some stories people they get operated on, or they get something tested and all kinds of crazy things. Didn't happen to me. It was pretty, I'd say, boring, but it wasn't boring in the moment I was there. It was terrifying. Uh, I've never had anything. Now, it reminds me of one other thing. I know this is a long story. I had to have an eye surgery about 4 years ago, and they put me in this. They said it was a twilight state because you had to be awake for this eye surgery. And a friend of mine said, you know, some of those stories people talk about, the people, it's that kind of thing where you're awake but you can't move, uh, and they kind of fix people's eye open so they can test. I'm talking about alien stories. Uh, I don't know. I've heard that before somewhere from my friend, but uh, I that surgery was still nothing like what happened to me that night. I was awake and I couldn't quite move, but I knew. I mean, I knew I was awake and it was a surgery and it was real, and so it was real, just every bit as I feel the inside alien ship was real the same way. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a hallucination. But uh, again, it's not something I write a book about. And when Gary asked me if I'd put a YouTube video on, I said, well, again, I don't want my name out there a whole bunch or anything like that. But I think that if it's not true, there's a lot of people that imagine stuff, and I guess I'll be one of them. But if it is true, which I tend to lean that way pretty strongly from experience, uh, there has to be something. There will be some point, I would assume, that they will make more of a communication with us. I would guess. I don't know. You can think about it till the cows come home, and you still can't figure it out. Uh, I know there seems to be lots more sightings in the news today than there ever was back when this happened in the 80s. So I don't know if that's more people having cell phones and there's cameras everywhere and whatnot, or if it's just there's more sightings, something's happening, something's coming, or uh, the last thing I want to just say, uh, because I think this is important. I remember some people, when I would tell this story to them, it scared them because they knew I was telling them the story that was truthful to me. And they're realizing that if this is real, then there's these aliens out there, and it shakes them up a little bit. I understand that totally, because we don't know what's going on out in the universe and what these aliens would be doing. I couldn't begin to imagine. But as scared as I was, and I just wanted to say something about the aftermath of it, like the next day, once I had thought it through, uh, I was scared at the time, not because they were doing anything scary, if that makes any sense. I was just scared because it was unknown. I hadn't done it before. Like maybe if you rode a Ferris wheel and the first time you went up in that Ferris wheel and you were up high, it scared you. Well, then you rode it again the 10 minutes later or 6 months later or throughout your life, and it wasn't scary anymore. It was not new and frightening. So I think most of the fear was just because I didn't know what was going on. But here's the part that I think is the most important. The other than when the light was shining on me, but the time I was laying on the table, it was a feeling that I have a hard time explaining to anybody. I get chills. It just happened to me just thinking about it. It was a peaceful feeling. Again, taking a crazy story and making it a little more crazy. But I was scared because I didn't know what was going on. But underneath it, I had a peaceful feeling, like it was everything was going to be okay, and I I felt like they were trying to help me somehow. I don't know. I'm just telling you what I felt. It was a strong feeling, and it was real strong the next day. Of course, I got up and I didn't want to tell Mama. I told my wife, and first, and later I told my mama, and she said, "Well, you know, the same thing happened to your Aunt Ruth." I'd never heard that, but over the coming weeks, I guess, uh, I'm just going to come out and say it. And this is not something I say to everybody. I say it to some people who get kind of in a tizzy about, oh my God, please don't let this happen to me, and don't let them come here. It's not a children's story. It can be scary, but I had a feeling that it was okay. It was okay. It was peaceful, and I was, for whatever reason, I was a changed person. People noticed that I was calmer. I didn't have any kind of a temper anymore. I think I became more accepting of people and everything. I had a temper in my youth, um, and that was gone. I don't know if you'd say get a psychologist and he can tell you it was because of the trauma and maybe it changed me, but I'm going to tell you what I think about it, which is in some way, they, even though they didn't communicate with me, some way they communicated to me that they were okay and I was okay and I didn't have anything to fear of them. It, I'm not saying I'd want it to happen again. Actually, it doesn't scare me anymore. Um, but it might be, I suppose it would end up kind of being an interesting thing. But I didn't have that fear anymore, and I just became a more peaceful person. That's the only way I can really describe it. Just that I was more accepting, um, and that's me telling you my opinion that they somehow communicated to me. Again, maybe it was because I was so scared it changed me. People come back from the war and they're changed and traumatized. Uh, but bad as it was, looking back on it now, it was somehow it was a good experience. I needed it. And some even crazier than the whole story has already been. I don't know how my life would have been the way I was before. Maybe I would have changed and become more peaceful anyway, but it seemed like, I don't know, somehow that changed things and gave me a different kind of peace. Sorry, I don't have a better way of putting it. It's kind of, I always tell it on as I remember it. Uh, the only time I say anything about that part towards the end, mostly I just give the details, but sometimes people get shook up and they worry. I can tell they worry that they could be coming for us and whatever, take over and kill us all. And I told them, or I've told them all, that I don't think so. That's all I can say about it. So, uh, sorry I rambled on a little bit. Um, just another story to add to your collection of craziness in the world out there. And that was it. All right.